want to start by telling you a little bit about my family and something that happens quite often in my family. Most of you know I've got a wife. Her name is Bree. I've got a son. He's 6 years old. His name is Nash. And I've got a daughter. Her name is Lake. She's 2.5. And in the Black household, there is a very common phrase that Bree and I have to use on a daily basis, and that phrase is, not yet. We say it all the time, and maybe you could relate to this a little bit when you were younger. Maybe this is something, maybe you still hear it now from your parents, but maybe it's something you heard a lot more when you were younger. But Lake will always ask me, every single morning, every single afternoon, she'll say, Dad, can I have a snack? Can I have a snack? Can I have a snack? And even tonight, it was funny because I had gone through my teaching again before I got home from work, picked Blake up, got home, and she, like, over and over, Dad, can I have a snack? Can I have more bunny gummies? Can I have more bunny gummies? And over and over, I'm like, not yet, Lake, not yet, because we're going to have dinner. You can't spoil their appetite. And then Nash, again, same thing, get home from work today, and I had already written this down, and they're both doing the thing that I had written about them. Nash is saying, can I watch a show? Can I watch a show? Can I watch Mickey Mouse Clubhouse? And again, it's like, not yet, buddy. You got to finish your 3 things before you do this. Every day he has 3 things he has to do when he gets home, that he has to do that before he can watch the show. And I have to say, every day, 3-4 times, not yet, not yet, not yet. And I want to give you fair warning, because you're going to be hearing this phrase, not yet, a lot in the next few weeks, because we're starting a new teaching series, aptly named, Not Yet. But hopefully, as we go through this series, it will help you to understand that phrase can sometimes be a good thing. And you're going to learn more about that over the next few weeks. But when my kids ask that question, it's usually because they are asking for some pretty minor things. It's something that they might want in a certain moment. But for each of you sitting in this room, whether you're junior high or high school, the not yets that you're getting in your life are a heck of a lot different. They are very, very different than the not yets my kids are getting for snacks and shows. Maybe you're waiting to get out of middle school, or to learn how to drive, or to graduate, or to get a job, or to move out and go to college, or maybe some of you are wanting to vote. I know, a lot of you are itching to get to that age 18, where you can contribute to democracy by submitting your ballot for one of the candidates. Yeah, I have a question. Have any of you heard of recess therapy? Anyone here heard? So good. It's awesome. If you haven't heard of it, it's essentially this guy, this really nice guy, who's out interviewing like people Nash's age, like super young kids on the playground at recess. And sometimes the conversations are just kind of surface level. A lot of times they get really deep. And so I thought that we could take a moment to watch something like that together. So let's watch this.
Do you think kids should be able to vote?
No. If they got a chance to vote, they might make a wrong choice. You have to grow up and think everything through before you start to vote.
Do you think you would make a good president?
I don't think right now, but probably in the future. Look, you can't be the president, because if you were the president, you'd have to you might not know how important you get and how stressed you'd probably get, because a bunch of people would be crowding around you and taking pictures, and you'll be really stressed, because a bunch of cameras coming down at you, maybe even helicopters just taking pictures, is very stressing.
How do you know all this?
Listening to the facts that are really important, and it's taught me a lot.
How old are you?
6. I think we're good.
Are you done here?
Yeah.
No more questions?
No more questions. I'm good now.
Well, thank you, sir.
Bye.
I love it. I love it so much. This kid is so wise, and he seems to have this really wise approach to something that I think we all struggle with. Sometimes we want the opportunities and the freedoms that come with growing up, but the truth is we're not quite ready for them. Some things we're just not quite ready for. And so what do we do with these wants that require skills and they require experiences that we maybe don't have yet in life? It's not like we'll never get there, but we're living in the not yet, and that's not easy. Especially during middle school and high school, for every person in this room, life sometimes feels like a never-ending waiting game. You might feel like you're constantly waiting to get older, just aging, gaining more freedom, finding more clarity about your future. And sometimes, if you ever want to skip ahead in your story to see what kind of person you'll become and what your future holds, that's what we're going to be talking about in this series, and I think you're really going to like it. So for the next few weeks, we're going to be talking about the questions and fears, the frustrations, and the excitement about thinking about what our future can hold. When we think about the future, there are so many reasons we might get frustrated with our progress in the present. Maybe you're taking longer to develop a skill than you would like, or you're continuing to make the same mistakes that you make over and over and over again that you said you would never make. Or maybe you're not sure how to make progress in areas that you want to grow in your life or your spiritual faith. But I want to ask you a question. How many of you, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but how many of you plan to go to like college or university when you're older? Yeah, again, you don't have to answer. Maybe some of you don't want to, that's okay. And as a follow-up, I want to ask another question. How many years do you think it takes to graduate with like the average university degree? How many years do you think? Yeah, Wes? 4 to 9. I like that. We got some 4s in the back. A lot of 4s. Yeah, I'd say like, it depends on what kind of program you're in, but the average university degree takes about 4 years to graduate with. Well, I want to tell you that my university degree took a little bit longer than that. It took a little bit longer than 4 years. I'm going to tell you. I'm always going to tell you, Wes. I started right when I was done high school. In 2007. How many of you were born in the year 2007? Actually? Were you guys actually born in 2007? So, in 2007. But I changed universities one time. I changed degree programs technically twice. I started a full-time job here at North Park. I got married. I had 1 kid before I graduated. And so it took me a total of 11 and a half years to graduate with my undergraduate degree. I did it. Thank you. I did not need that applause. It took way too long. So you can imagine that there were many, many moments during my educational journey, that's what I like to call it, that I got frustrated with how long it was taking because I just wanted it to be over. It was one of those things I just wanted to be done. I know that university people did not understand exactly what I'm talking about, but after 11 and a half years, I just wanted to be done with my degree and move on. And I think no matter how old you are, it's normal to occasionally feel unhappy with the progress you're making in areas of your life. For some of us, that frustration might lead us to work even harder and to get to these, like to work really, really hard, but then end up even more frustrated in ourselves and the effort that we're putting in. Or for others, I think you might end up wanting to just give up completely and try something else or just stop doing the thing that you're doing. And whether it's your hobbies or your grades or your training or your relationships or your faith, we have to figure out how to make progress while being patient with ourselves at the same time. As we're waiting in the not yet of our futures, we might find ourselves asking big questions like, who I am? Who do I want to be? What does my future hold? What's my purpose? And if that's you, I think you'll probably find this book in the Bible called Ecclesiastes pretty interesting. It's this book of poetry in the Bible, and it's written by this guy named Solomon. And it wrestles with this huge question, probably like the question of all questions, what's the meaning of life? And Solomon was known for his wisdom. He was known for this guy who just had the most wisdom ever in all of humanity, and it was all wisdom that God gave him. And so as Solomon was thinking about the meaning of his life and his future, there are some words that he wrote in Ecclesiastes 3, starting at verse 1. I'm going to open it up. I've got a sticky note here to hold my spot. And maybe you recognize this passage, but I'm going to read it for us. For everything there is a season, a time for every activity under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to harvest, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to cry and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to turn away, a time to search and a time to quit searching, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be quiet and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. What do people really get for all their hard work? I have seen the burden God has placed on all of us. Yet God has made everything beautiful for its own time. He has planted eternity in the human heart, but even so, people cannot see the whole scope of God's work from beginning to end. Dying, tearing down, mourning, weeping, war, all of these things don't sound very fun at all. But according to Solomon, even in the uncomfortable and sometimes painful parts of life, they have a place. They have a time and a place. I don't think Solomon wants us to ignore the slow, painful, or uncomfortable seasons in our lives. I don't think he wants us to simply wait for the future just to unfold, but instead I think Solomon's inviting us to realize that every single bit of our lives have purpose, even the times that feel pointless or difficult. There's another book in the Bible that I want to talk about tonight. It's called Revelation. It's the last book of the Bible, and it's written by a guy named John. And it's not usually the book of the Bible people read when they're thinking about like the now, the present. Usually when people are reading the book of Revelation, they're talking about the future. They're talking about things to come. And Solomon, back in Ecclesiastes, said that no one can understand what God has done from beginning to end, but Revelation does give us a little bit of insight into what God has in store for our futures. And so I want to read Revelation 21. And again, this might be a familiar passage to you. This is actually, I don't know how you guys feel about tattoos, but there was, maybe you'll see what I'm talking about, but there's a part of this passage that I've always wanted to get tattooed on me because it is so inspiring and something I think about often. So it's in Revelation 21, starting at verse 1, going to verse 5. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the old heaven and the old earth had disappeared, and the sea was also gone. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven like a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. I heard a loud shout from the throne saying, "Look, God's home is now among his people. He will live with them, and they will be his people, for God himself will be with them. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there will be no more death or sorrow or crying or pain." What a beautiful passage. All these things are gone forever. And the one sitting on the throne said, "Look, I am making everything new." And then he said to me, "Write this down, for what I tell you is trustworthy and true." There's another version of the Bible, a different translation, that says, "Behold, I am making all things new." I love the action involved in that. God is at work. God is making things new. And I want to put it on my arm somewhere. This passage is talking about God's future plans for all creation, but I think there's something important when we're reading this passage to understand about God's plans for us as individuals here and now. So when you hear God say, "I'm making everything new," it might remind you of something that Solomon said again back in Ecclesiastes, that passage we just read, where he says God would make everything perfect in its time. In both our individual lives and in all of creation, God is ready and able to make things new. When John wrote the book of Revelation, he was offering encouragement to Jesus followers, Christians, then, now, and in the future, that God is present. The encouragement was that God is present and at work in every single moment. God can make things new now and then and forever. He can make things new when life is less than beautiful, when we're longing for something that we don't yet have, when we're waiting or delayed, when we're frustrated with our progress. God can make everything new. The words of Solomon and John help us to see that everything is a work in progress, all of creation and all of us too. I can't tell you exactly what God has for you in store, God has in store for your future, but here's what I do know. It will be beautiful. God is going to make it beautiful. So when you feel like you're waiting for someday, don't just ignore or wait for the uncomfortable parts of life to end. Remember how much value today has. You are a work in progress, and that's more than okay. Some of us are looking toward our dreams for the future and ignoring the boring, painful, and uncomfortable moments that we're in right now. And others of us haven't really thought about the future because we're so busy living in the present. But if we want to become the people that God designed us to be, the trick is to care about both the now and the not yet. So this week, I want to give you 2 challenges. And part of these challenges, it's going to require a little bit of your time. It's going to require about 5 minutes each morning. But I think that you can do it before you go to school. The first challenge is I want you to notice the progress that you've already made. You're reflecting back. When you feel stuck or discouraged or bored with where you're at right now in life, take a few moments to think about how far you've already come. What has God already done in your life? How has your relationship with Jesus grown over this last year or 2 years? What is the biggest lesson that you've learned? How have you grown or changed in the last year? Or what do you believe now that maybe you didn't believe a year ago? And then the second thing I want you to do is take a moment just to ask God to help you to make more progress. Since you're a work in progress, like all of us, and you will always be, you've got some progress to make. So take a few moments to reflect on how you can continue becoming the person that God made you to be. What questions do you have about your future that you'd like God to answer? In what areas in your life do you need God's help to trust Him more? What's a struggle or behavior or temptation that you need God's help to overcome? What's one way that you need God's help to become more like Jesus? Or what's something that you know you can't accomplish in your life without God's help? We're all works in progress, but I think it is so exciting to know that we follow a God who is able to make all things new, including us. None of us are perfect, but with Jesus, we're in the process of becoming more of who God made us to be. We are all works in progress. Let's pray. God, thank you for this reminder. This reminder of the fact that we are all imperfect people. We're all in these moments of not yet, the in-between. And yet, God, we can trust the fact that you are here with us, working in our lives currently, presently. And God, there are so many things in our lives that we just want to get to, whether it's graduation, or whether it's being able to drive, or whatever it is. God, there are so many things we just want to be able to get to. And yet, here we are in the present, waiting sometimes impatiently. And so, God, help us to remember how much you're at work here and now with us. God, remind us of how you're making everything new. God, this has been such a good reminder to me, and I hope that it's a good reminder to our students as well, especially those who are just looking towards the future. God, continue to remind us of who we are in you. Continue to remind us that we are a child in you. God, we are so grateful for the work that you do in our lives, for the things that you're up to in this world. We're grateful to be a part of it, but continue to remind us of these things. We ask this in your name. Amen.